Hey everybody, Jeppy here, and today I'm ranking every agent in Valorant from incredibly broken to perfectly balanced. So as I'm sure most of you know, balance is something that every developer for every competitive game out there is constantly working towards. But it is extremely hard to balance a game, right? Especially with the vast differences in skill levels from the best players to the worst players. Valorant is no exception to this. Agents that are seen as terrible by top ranked and pros are seen as gods in lower ranks and vice versa. So I have 4 categories to rank every agent. The first category is incredibly broken. These are the agents that sway so far away from balance like it's not even close. This doesn't even necessarily only mean strong agents. Weak agents will be in this category too because they aren't balanced in power level. The next category is relatively unbalanced. This is for agents that are getting closer to balance but still have flaws that sway them from either being too strong or too weak. The next category is relatively balanced for agents that are just about perfectly balanced but may only have like 1 or 2 things that need to be worked on. The last category are agents that are perfectly balanced, not too strong, not too weak, can be played on a fair amount of maps and fit into a fair amount of team comps. Let's first start us off with the most unbalanced agent we have in Valorant, Reyna. Wait, Jeppy, Reyna, isn't Chamber clearly the strongest agent in Valorant and that makes him the most unbalanced? And the answer to that question is yes, Chamber is the strongest agent, but I'm going off the balance between all players. For the vast majority of the player base, Reyna is an absolute menace in ranked. Any good smurf or a cracked player chooses Reyna because she is most self-sufficient, healing agent we have. But when you ask top ranked and pro players what they think about Reyna, they all say she is far too weak and incredibly underwhelming in their lobbies due to her selfish and non-team oriented kit. So yes, while Chamber is the strongest agent in Valorant, he is seen as strong in every rank, but Reyna is so polarizing between the majority of ranked versus top ranked and pros. So I would consider her as the most unbalanced agent because of how far the pendulum swings with where you place Reyna in a tier list for balance. Top ranked and pros are calling for Reyna buffs and mostly consider her to be one of the weakest agents in Valorant, if not the weakest, while most Valorant ranked players are furious with Reyna and hate when smurfs and cracked players abuse her playstyle, which leads to her being the least balanced agent in my opinion. Yes, Chamber will be up next though, he is still incredibly strong. But before we talk about Chamber, a word from today's epic sponsor. This time when we talk about Valorant Checker, I want to dedicate this to the hidden gem is the guide section, which has a ton of tips and tricks for any agent you want to learn something with. I've personally picked up a few Fade Haunt lineups with this. There's like so much more too, like any agent you need, like there's some really good tips and tricks there. There's also some amazing tricks with Sova if you want to learn lineups with the shock darts or recon bolts, along with the ever important cringe lineups with Viper post plant lineups, slight executes, and more. Like look at this disgusting lineup that makes me want to just absolutely vomit in my mouth and never play Valorant again and just go cry in bed because of how disgusting and awful this is. But also at the same time, I kind of do want to use it because it does look good. So do yourself a favor, everybody, and download Valorant Checker completely for free using my link in the description or the pinned comment. And thank you, Valorant Checker, for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so Chamber, he has received like 3 or 4 nerfs now and is still top dog in the meta. I think the only thing left they need to take a look at for Chamber's kit is to see how quickly he uses Rendezvous TP to get out of a gunfight in like a blink of an eye. All Riot really needs to do now with Chamber is to slightly increase the length of the animation for him to TP out of a gunfight, and I think he would be a fairly balanced agent after that. His ult is extremely expensive now, even though it's still good. It's a monetary risk if you miss a ton of bullets with Headhunter, like it might take you quite a few credits to even, get a kill, if you get a kill at all. Chamber is slowly working his way to being balanced, but currently he is still so far from it that he ended up in this category. The next agent here and incredibly broken is Cypher. You either get 2 options to have success with Cypher. Either you're a god with him and have plenty of like setups, so once the enemies start catching up to your locations of gadgets, you can switch it up to something else and keep them guessing on where your stuff is. Or you play in low ranked lobbies where Cypher kind of works in it because players in these lobbies aren't very good, to be honest, and don't communicate with each other, which makes Cypher pretty good there. If you are an average player or an above average player but haven't mastered Cypher yet, he is extremely weak. But if you do put in the time or in low ranked lobbies, Cypher may be a decent pick. But yeah, on most maps and in most lobbies, Cypher is the weakest sentinel by far, which makes him a member of this category. The last agent I'm going to put here is Harbor. It's no secret that Harbor is kind of a dud when it comes to the agents of Valorant. He's a budget Viper that has a pretty weak kit. I haven't looked at any win rates for Harbor, so I'm not sure if he's like winning much at all. If anyone here watching plays a good amount of Harbor, let me know in the comments on how well you are or the team is doing with him. But I never see him in any games, and here's why. His abilities don't last very long at all. Viper does mostly everything he does, but better. Maybe if his orbit blocks projectile abilities to stop lineups, it would be a fun little niche Harbor can have. Also, his ultimate is pretty bad, and the wave he has and the wall of water he puts up needs to not slow his his teammates down and work on the length of his abilities. I think this is a good stepping stone to get him into balance, but as of right now, he's an incredibly weak controller. Now we move into the relatively unbalanced category. The first agent I'm going to put here is Fade. Now Fade is incredibly strong in the meta, almost right up there with Chamber. I have her here in this category though, because I don't think she's that far out of getting closer to balance. Yes, she is strong, but I think the source of most of that power comes from her prowlers. Yes, her haunt is great and her tether is okay and her ult is really good, but her prowlers are what really makes Fade amazing. They have too much HP in my opinion, which makes them devastating on pistol or save rounds for the enemies. Plus their ability to follow a trail if the enemy gets scanned from her haunt or tagged in her ult is great as well. I like playing Fade, but I do recognize she is incredible and her prowlers are the main source of that power in my opinion. Nerf them a little bit more and I think Fade gets much closer to being balanced, even though the rest of her abilities and ult are relatively strong as well. Up next is Astra. Now just like Harbor, everyone knows that Astra is pretty weak. You need an extremely well coordinated team with communication to fully unlock her potential or make her even viable. Pearl is really the only map she has like played on, and even once in a while you'll see her on like Fracture maybe. Astra's concuss ability is pretty weak and it takes her forever to get her stars back after recalling them. We don't want to go back to when Astra was like absolutely dominating and terrifying the meta, because let's be real guys, that was hell to deal with, but we can't just let her sit here as one of the worst controllers, especially with how cool of a design she is. The reason why she is here and not in the previous category, because if your team is coordinated enough, she can be played and have good value on the team, but it takes everyone to communicate with Astra, letting her know where to use her global abilities to do so. The next agent here is going to be Viper actually. Now we talked about her a bit when discussing Harbor, but she is an absolute must pick on like half the maps in Valorant, with her being a decent pick on the other ones. She is incredibly versatile and can have nutty setups either on attack or defense as well. She has arguably the strongest ultimate in the entire game too. I myself don't think Viper needs any crazy nerfs in my opinion. I just think that Harbor needs to be buffed, as he was supposed to be like an alternate pick to Viper when you want long line of sight blockage for your team. Maybe tone down the decay of her Viper's Pit and Poison Orb a bit, and maybe make it to where her snake bites can't be launched as far to kind of nerf lineups a bit. Those little changes plus buffs to Harbor will not make her be a must pick anymore and bring Viper back into a balanced territory. Next up is Breach. Now Breach is not a bad agent, he is just incredibly map dependent, with him being seen really only on Fracture and Haven. The problem is Breach's utility mostly focuses in a narrow pattern. It doesn't really have much area of effect from side to side. So maps or locations on maps that have long narrow pathways, Breach does really well on. Pretty much everywhere else though, Breach is not nearly as effective, which places him in this category as he is really only effective in niche situations. I would love to have the option as a Breach player to change his utility before you use it into a shorter but wider area effect, or choose to have the normal long and narrow AoE for a stunned ability he already has. It would make him more versatile, I believe, and bring him closer to balanced. I'm going to put Yoru next up in this category. Yoru is a very weird agent. In the right hands of a Yoru master, he is amazing and can really throw the enemies for a loop. But if you haven't put much time into, or even an average amount of time into, the Riftwalker Yoru, he is pretty underwhelming and doesn't really work as he's intended to. He really does require a dedicated player to master him and see true value out of a duelist. I think the skill floor and the skill ceiling are too far apart for Yoru, which tends to lead into the difference a good Yoru and a bad / decent Yoru can have. Last in this category though is going to be Neon, and for the exact same reasons as Yoru. She really requires a player to understand how she is played best and work with your team to capitalize off of Neon's speed and crosshair breaking abilities. If you don't have a teammate to either set you up with a flash, stun, smoke, or whatever, or don't have teammates to follow your slide or get your trade, she kind of just puts herself out there in the open and dies pretty easily. But if you do have a team that sets up that Neon and plays with her correctly, she can be really good in those situations. So yeah, she requires a lot of work and coordination to get good value out of her, but when you do, she can help the team drastically. Now let's move into the relatively balanced category. These are agents that are so close to being perfectly balanced, with only a few exceptions keeping them here. The first agent I'm going to put here is Killjoy. She is actually pretty close to being balanced, with only a few things holding her back. We need to increase the range of her bots being active if Killjoy is farther away, because it pretty much forces her to camp onto a site because the range is pretty short. I also think KJ should be able to pick up her mollies if she has to rotate, because it's so annoying putting down her mollies in the prep phase, you know, for a setup, just to have the enemies push the other site. Let her pick up those mollies and use them for the retake on the site, so that way it's not a huge waste of credits just to have them sit there on the ground. Yeah, Killjoy is really close to being perfectly balanced in my opinion, and only really needs an increase in her range for the bots and being able to pick up her mollies. That, along with the little chamber nerf too, it'll help her pick rate much more as well. The next agent here is Phoenix. Now, the reason why he's here is because his abilities are either really good or really bad. His curveball, blind, and ultimate, good stuff. I love it. His hot hands, molly, and firewall, bad stuff. I hate it. He's kinda a one-trick pony and really only gets value from his flashes and ultimate. Yeah, his wall and molly can heal himself, but overall, they're pretty weak abilities. Phoenix isn't a bad agent at all and is actually pretty strong right now, but maybe if his other abilities were more viable, it would bring his overall power level up. But then he might become too powerful and might need a slight nerf to his flash or ultimate to get him nice and balanced out. Jeez, I don't know. What do you guys think? Next up is the robotic radiant killer KO. So surprisingly, according to the devs, KO is one of the weakest agents in ranked, but in Pro League, he is really strong. It all boils down to teammate coordination and how well the enemies use their utility. If the enemy team uses their util in fantastic ways to capitalize off of it, KO is better because he takes that power away from them. If they aren't a util focused team and kind of focus on gameplay, KO is weaker because they rely on their gameplay, not utility. KO has a lot going for him, but if you and your team aren't ready to capitalize on the nullified powers that your knife and ultimate cause, there may be better initiators to pick instead. Next is going to be Skye. Now, Skye is a weird situation because on paper, she sounds amazing, right? Like she can flash for herself and her team with getting intel while doing so. She can stun with her dog and scout out the area, you know, getting intel. She can heal. Her ultimate is fairly weak, but is a good information tool. So why isn't Skye played more? Well, we only really see her have a decent pick rate on bind, which is weird because I think she's a really good agent. And maybe that Fade is stealing her pick rate because her prowlers are like Skye's dog, but better, and she gets more of them. Perhaps if Fade's prowlers got nerfed, we'd see Skye more, because I don't think she is a bad agent. Like, she's actually really good in my opinion. Maybe if she was able to heal herself along with her teammates, it would help her out too. What do you guys think? The last agent for the relatively balanced category is Brimstone. Brim is just about a perfectly balanced agent with a ton to offer. He's got 2 post plant or AoE denial abilities in his molly and ultimate. His stim beacon offers a rush option for the team, and his smokes are really good and last forever. The only issue I have with Brimstone is the range in which he can place his smokes. Brim has to be relatively close to the action in order to get smokes down and can't place them anywhere near as far away like Omen or Astro. All you have to do to make Brimstone perfectly balanced is increase the range in which he can place his smokes by a decent amount, and then there you go, Brimstone is perfectly balanced. Now we find ourselves in the perfectly balanced category, you know, the category we were just talking about. The first agent we're going to put here is Jet. She is actually a pretty balanced agent in my opinion. She requires a decent amount of skill to use and is really good at taking space for the team. Her ultimate is really good, but can be wasted easily if you don't land the knives. Her abilities all pair well with each other, and her dash must be timed to anticipate a gunfight, which was a great change, by the way. She is a great opper with being able to smoke or dash away if she doesn't hit the shot, or she might get traded in a second. Overall, I think she is perfectly balanced, minus a slightly increased window of her being able to dash. I think that's like the only thing they need to do a little update for Jet. Like, give her a little more time to decide if she needs to dash or not by increasing the window slightly. The next agent here may surprise you guys, but it's going to be Raze. I actually think she is perfectly balanced. She supplies intel and creates space with her boombot. Her blast packs require skill to master and take space as well. Her grenade is a great AoE staller and does some considerable damage, and it all takes skill while doing so. She's not the best on every map, but is very versatile and really excels on some maps too. I think the main thing that I enjoy about Raze is how much it takes to really master her blast packs. If you're not good with them, then you don't offer the same amount of entry you could for your team opposed to as a player that's proficient at them. Yeah, I think Raze has a great mix of being viable on a bunch of maps at all ranks without being an absolute must pick on really any maps. She is really strong on binds though, but I don't think she's a must pick. The next agent here is Sova. Sova is a really well balanced agent in my opinion. His utility requires time to learn angles or lineups. Nothing is super oppressive while nothing is weak. His ultimate is great for post plant scenarios, but is also very versatile with denying plants or just trying to take out an enemy you tagged with your drone. There was a time before Fade's release that Sova was incredibly strong. and like a must pick on almost every single map. But I don't think it was because Sova himself was super oppressive. It was because there was a lack of information gathering agents at the time. Sova simply did it the best in that era. Now with Fade being released, she does it better, which doesn't make Sova weak. He just has competition now. The second to last agent for today's video is Sage. Now Sage is strong with being okay to mid on some maps, but excelling well on others. No map is she an absolute must pick, maybe besides like Icebox, but she also has no maps she is terrible on. Her management of resources differentiates between a good and great Sage. Making sure you stay alive so you can supply your team with heals, res, or wall throughout the round is a must. Plus her slow orbs are a pretty good slowdown ability as well. Overall, Sage is really well balanced, and I'm sure you guys can agree with me. She never feels oppressive, but you'll never see anyone complain about having a Sage either. So that leaves us with Omen, the most balanced agent in Valorant in my opinion. He has to be one of the most versatile agents in Valorant without ever being too strong or annoying to go up against. His smokes have a long range he can deploy them and can be put up on elevations to create nutty one-ways, but don't last very long. His near sight goes through walls and is undodgeable, but has a narrow AoE. His try to step does offer verticality, but has a somewhat lengthy animation to it. His ult offers for fantastic rotations or surprises, but also is pretty situational. It seems like for everything Omen has going for him, there's a little tiny counter or hindrance in every ability. He's not terrible or bad on any map besides Breeze, which is dominated by Viper, but he's also not a must pick on any map. You could play him anywhere in any rank or team. So that's why Omen is the most balanced agent in Valorant. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you have any changes you'd like to make to my list, please feel free to share them in the comments below. Leave a like and subscribe notifications if you're new. Now with all that being said, Jeppy out.